broadcast network, AFTERBUZZ TV. Over 20 million weekly downloads in over 150 countries, and your #1 source for after-show entertainment. AFTERBUZZ TV, the destination for TV superfans. Producing aftershows for over 300 of your favorite TV shows. Interviewing celebrities and showrunners. And bringing you behind-the-scenes exclusives. All thanks to E! Entertainment's Maria Menounos, producer Kevin Undergaro, and internet leader Akamai. Now, let the buzz begin!
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Hear that music of the wonderful 98 Degrees, the boy band from not so long ago, but oh so long ago for some of us. Ah, man. That sound can only mean one thing, that we're here talking Lachey's Bar on AfterBuzz TV. Thank you guys for joining me, your host, Phil Svitek, talking about Season 1, Episode 3. If you haven't already done so, feel free to subscribe. If you've listened to the past 2 episodes, welcome back. If this is your first time joining, welcome. Hopefully you're an AfterBuzz fan in general. If not, well, congratulations on finding us. And again, we do various other TV shows, so feel free to check those out as well. But I'm glad we're talking Lachey's Bar. So let's kind of open things up. I'm learning a lot about Nick and Drew. And obviously, we knew that was going to happen, but the fact that their personalities, to cut ahead a little bit, Drew is very much kind of very detailing oriented, and he stresses out a lot more. Versus Nick, he kind of takes a step back, as by their own words, Nick is a delegator, Drew is a doer, and I also got to hand it to Drew. He's so far from the show, 2 for 2 in terms of decision-making when it comes to big items. So the big item, the episode's called Tailgate Taste Test, and obviously that refers to the food that they eventually want in Lachey's Bar. And I got to hand it out to Chef Brian Duffy. He is the chef that they go to. He is the chef that prepares these various meals for them, so that way they can kind of taste test and see what they like. And it's always fun to see when they don't get along, or they can't decide what's better. And the reason why I shout out Chef Brian Duffy is because he's also on Bar Rescue. He is, as Nick and Drew point out, he is a world-renowned chef. He is an amazing chef, and I'm glad to actually call him a personal friend as well. And so I'm glad to see, Chef Brian Duffy on this show as well, helping promote himself. He is fantastic, and he knows food really, really well. And, for me, ultimately, whether it was pierogies or the buffalo chicken dip, either one was going to be fantastic because it's Chef Brian Duffy. So congrats, buddy, on that. And, Nick and Drew, congrats on finding an expert like Chef Brian Duffy. And we kind of go through various foods and things like that. But before we kind of fully get into, that being the majority of the storyline of tonight's episode, let me talk about, Vanessa comes to visit, and that was a nice surprise for Nick. They've kind of been apart, and, as she later on says, she can't fly past November 12th because, of medical reasons. And so it's good for her to kind of get out here, see not only what Nick is up to, but also to kind of see the bar. She's been in LA, kind of cooped up, with Camden and, her pregnant old self. But now she finally, for the first time, gets to really see the bar. I'm sure she's seen pictures, but nothing, when you build something like that, nothing really, gives it to you like being in that space physically. And I know because we're in the midst of, building out some cool stuff that will affect AfterBuzz in a positive way. So look out for that. But again, it's just really cool when it's why people buy land so they can build houses. When you build it from the ground up and you get to really truly call it your own, there's something to it. And the fact that Vanessa and Nick get to share that is wonderful. Now, the not so wonderful part is the fact that the pregnancy is right around the time that the bar is opening, right? The bar is opening in around December, which obviously sets us back further than initially intended. They want to hit football season, which football season obviously September. So, they haven't quite made mention of that as to, if they are delayed, if they're on time, so on and so forth. I would kind of like to see, for my own curiosity, the business side of things, but perhaps the audience doesn't. And I think overall for a 22-minute show, they're finding a good balance between Nick and Drew's personal lives as well as dealing with the bar, and we're kind of seeing the mixture, and I think they are finding that balance in lieu of perhaps some of the business stuff that maybe in an hour show they could show. They're not, but I would like to see that. So anyway, that was a long way around the fact that Vanessa cannot be there for the bar opening, and that really is sad. As I mentioned, when you get to build something from the ground up, and even though she's not involved with it to the degree that obviously Nick and Drew are, but being Nick's wife and just like Drew's wife, they're on the periphery. They hear these guys talking about it pretty much constantly at this point. It's overtaken Drew's life, certainly to the point that he had to have a talk with his wife about the jungle gym, because that wasn't getting, family stuff was going by the wayside in lieu of the bar. And so, as a wife, when you hear about all these various things, yeah, you want to be involved in it, and certainly you want to be there for the grand opening. I mean, that's what it's all about. They're Hollywood people, and so with that you have premieres and things like that, and a launch of a bar, that's kind of your red carpet, that's your premiere, and you want to be involved in that. It's something to be proud of. It's a moment to share, and especially from as I get to know these guys more, they do cherish those moments. There's a great quote of, "There are extraordinarily beautiful moments. Those are the ones that I live for," and I think that's ultimately what these guys are all about. Yes, it's about creating something out of nothing. And calling it their own, but when they do get that moment, just like last week's fishing trip, that was the time to cherish with their dad, regardless of whether or not they caught fish or not. It was just about the time spent together, and so a launch of the bar is that time spent together. So, and then ultimately Vanessa leaves back to LA, and Nick continues on with his work, which we kind of take a slight detour because Drew's life, there, as I mentioned, his family life has been taking a back seat, and he's got to build a jungle gym for the kids. This was ordered months ago. It's all ready to go, so on and so forth. But despite perhaps the lead time on this, the woods and the trees and the grass and the bushes aren't cleared out to be able to accommodate this. So that's got to happen, and then it's got to be built. And I respect the fact that Drew is a doer, and I don't necessarily know how skilled Nick and Drew are as handymen, but I can give it up to them because I know some, especially when you talk about quote unquote LA people, or there might be a stigma that these guys don't know how to, use a hammer, use a drill bit, and stuff like that. And it seems like for the most part they can. Are they going to be the greatest carpenters in the world? And no, but the fact that they can be handy around the house, I think is a huge benefit. And I think to a degree is going by the wayside, and it just further speaks to how they were raised as just kind of these good old Cincinnati boys. And this is the type of stuff that they learn and at least have knowledge of. So they were able to clear out the area. I liked, there was the moment of the tree when it was falling down, which, I'm siding with Drew a little bit on. Nick made more of it than was necessary. I didn't really sense too much danger, but hey, if you're Nick, I guess you got to protect yourself and call it to be a little bit more cautious, and so that's why he gets to call out Drew, and it is his brother and so on. So, certainly, I mean, ultimately, it's no joke when regardless of whether or not the tree was a ton or not, which obviously I don't think it was. But anytime a tree is coming down at you, you got to be a little more cautious. But it's all cleared away, and once it comes down to the building, of the actual jungle gym, I think despite them building it upside down the first time around, it's one of those things. Once you kind of get in a groove, the first hour, anyone at home who's ever put together an IKEA set, the first hour, and I will say just in general, even like a small cabinet, by the way, it can take up to 3 hours. I don't know why, it just does. So as long as you can succumb to the idea that you will be spending time on this, you can knock it out. But typically the first hour is spent learning the instructions and, perhaps getting the first part wrong. And then it starts to make sense. And once it starts to make sense, then you get into that groove and you're able to build it. So I do side with Drew a little bit that they called it in a little bit early. But you know what? When you do have, when you have people that do this day in, day out, yeah, absolutely, 100%. They will do it faster and they will do it better and more efficiently, but certainly doesn't make the job impossible to do. Let me know your thoughts. Should Nick and Drew have kept on going, or should they have not? So, again, I think they should have just a little bit more, but yes, part of it is we're not necessarily privy to their actual schedule, so they do have a lot going on with the bar. So if you can save some time and focus on that stuff, then yes, absolutely get the professionals. So we're sensing a theme here. We're deciding a lot based on the people of Cincinnati. And I'm glad this time around it's more about the actual people of Cincinnati versus just Nick and Drew's friends, which anytime that sort of happens, like with last week's episode, there were a few more of Drew's friends, it seemed like, or at least they painted it that way. And that's why, the awesome ale won. And this time around, Drew's food ultimately wins, but I like that they're having these sort of fun taste tests. And, in terms of the tailgate, yes, they're I'm sure a lot of the people that came are fans of theirs, but at least that they can kind of be honest a little bit more about it rather than as last time, where it was very much known of which beer was which person's. This time around, it's just it's just a dip versus a pierogi. And as I mentioned, the dip won ultimately. As Nick pointed out, he was not off to a good start when he said, "Hey, who would like to try pierogies?" And everyone's scratching their heads and being like, "Huh, what is that?" And I don't know. Maybe it just goes down to the fact that Drew understands the people of Cincinnati, as much as Nick, grew up here. Drew is the one that's been here. Nick is now at this point bi-coastal, and he's in New York, he's in LA, and now he's splitting his time with Cincinnati. So he's not as well grounded at the moment with the people of Cincinnati. So, you know what? If this pattern continues, I would definitely put my money on Drew to make these various decisions. So, hey, there it is. And you know what? For the most part, it looks like he's going to have to, simply because, as Nick points out, he's going to be gone for 2 weeks. And 2 weeks in these kind of stages, it is a lot. Everything's kind of got to be outlined. And it's tough. I don't know quite where they're at with the stage of the bar and everything, and what kind of remains. Perhaps if there was some sort of graphic checklist, it would be cool to kind of see. But we know they have the beer chosen. They put in $20,000 just for that. And I think it's like they'll have 150 kegs of that. So it's gonna be a lot. And Nick says, hey, if I'm holding you up decision-wise, Drew, you have the say-so to make these decisions. So we'll see. And, what happens if, Drew makes a decision that Nick is not necessarily proud of or happy with? Ultimately, we'll find out. And that's what we'll kind of, we'll continue on that vein in the next episode. Speaking of which, let's get into some predictions for the next episode.
And now, your AfterBuzz TV predictions.
Let me know your guys' predictions at home. I always love hearing those. I get the conversation started, but I love interacting with you guys at home. Ultimately, what the next steps are. It's always interesting where we're going to land up time-wise. I think we'll cut back to, once Nick is back in Cincinnati. So, whether that's exactly 2 weeks or 3 or whatever, that'll kind of happen. But I think that's where we'll pick up is the next time that Nick's in town, and we'll see what they ultimately have to kind of decide upon and what they have to argue about. But, so far, I really like, I think they're keeping the pace going really well. There's, I can't say conflict because it's not conflict, but I think, the insight into the various things that they have to deal with, both from, in terms of the bar, but then also we get to take that step back and learn about them. I think that's really, really cool. Especially if you're, 98 Degrees fan, if you're a Nick Lachey fan, if you're a Vanessa fan, whatever the case may be. I think there's something kind of for everybody. So, thank you guys for joining me on today's after show. And before I head out, I do want to thank our sponsor of the show, which is Mazda. And they have an important question for you. Does driving matter to you? If the answer is yes, Mazda is your answer. You may be one of those people that likes to drive with the windows down, the wind blowing through your hair. I imagine, Cincinnati's kind of like this, where you get the smell of pine trees and fresh asphalt. I mentioned Nick and Drew, they look forward to, special moments in life. Well, these are the types of moments that you can look forward to when it's just perhaps you on the road, or maybe even a loved one. There's no distractions. You're handling every curve. You're feeling every nuance in the road. And, again, that's when you really ask yourself, does driving matter to you? And if it does, Mazda has built cars just for you, because just like to you, to them, driving matters. And that's Mazda. So thank you, Mazda, for supporting not only this show, but also other AfterBuzz shows here as well. We really, really appreciate it. You guys have been great. And speaking of people who have been great, you as fans have been great. So thank you guys for continuing to listen to this show and every other show here on AfterBuzz TV. If you're a fan of multiple ones, to interact with us, tweet at AfterBuzz TV, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that stuff. And you know what? Even though Jen Golden and Lauren Leonelli, unfortunately, doesn't look like they can take part in the panel for the rest of the season just due to scheduling. They've got a lot of stuff going on. Be sure to tweet with them, Two Drunk Girls, and check them out there. At Jen the Golden as well for her personal Twitter. At Lauren Leonelli for Lauren's. And we'll see you here next Thursday on another Lachey's Bar.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.